Now on the news at 5, a wild night in Oregon. A tornado passes through the Damascus area, the fourth twister to touch down in the last year. Plus, pandemic perspective. It's easy to get lost in COVID case numbers, so we look beyond the data to bring some context to the calculations. And then another ongoing fight, this one not against a virus, but against racism. Protests continue here and across the country, calling for justice and systemic change. Your news at 5 starts right now. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for being here with us. I'm Brittany Folgers. Oregon is one of many states across the country that has seen a recent spike in the number of new coronavirus cases. The Oregon Health Authority just released its numbers for Sunday. 101 more people have tested positive for the virus. That's actually down slightly from yesterday. OHA says 2 more people have died, and as you can see, some of the highest single-day totals for cases have come in just the past week. While numbers are trending up, experts say it's really tough to know what they mean in the big picture. Galen Etlin checked in with the virus hunter at PSU for some context.
Dr. Ken Stedman at PSU studies viruses and checks Oregon's numbers daily.
With everything that's going on with COVID-19, I think we need to be extremely careful about what data are data and what are extrapolations.
As we trend up, Dr. Stedman says context is key. This chart from OHA backdates confirmed cases to when people started having symptoms. The beginning of June was when workers at Pacific Seafood got sick in Lincoln County.
There's that huge spike, and that makes a big difference in terms of the average. Everything is relatively level, so I don't think we're seeing a really huge increase right now.
These workplace outbreaks are easier to trace, which means people with the virus can help stop the spread.
Advising them to isolate at home, following up on their contacts, advising them to quarantine for 14 days.
Other outbreak clusters at long-term care facilities are also traceable and add to the spikes.
What we have seen in the recent weeks is a big uptick in our testing capabilities and getting testing done, as well as contact tracing, which then leads to more targeted, focused, and appropriate testing so that we have a much higher likelihood of finding the cases that are out there.
And while some worry about large gatherings and demonstrations across Oregon,
they've been outside. Most of them have had masks.
Several of our experts say it's too early to know the long-term impact.
We don't have real clarity on exactly what's happening during those protests.
Multnomah County says so far about 5 demonstrators have been confirmed as sick. The county is working to up its contact tracing. 40% of recent cases have an unknown source.
We estimate that for every person with COVID-19, they cause at least one additional person to be sick.
That's part of why reopening is on hold.
The governor's done a great thing, is let's see if that really is just a blip and an outlier, or if it really is an indication of a big trend.
Dr. Stedman says with COVID, one thing is clear.
It's not over. It's not going to be over for a while.
Galen Etlin, KGW News.
Happening right now, protesters in Portland are marching to the ICE facility near the south waterfront. This is live video of that area. They started at Poets Beach, making their way to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency building on McAdam Avenue. This site, you may remember, was the stage for the 2018 Occupy ICE protests, where protesters camped out and blocked the entrance of the building for more than a week. We are seeing a large law enforcement presence there, but the group has dissipated as the evening has gone on. We'll continue to follow these protests happening today here on air and online at kgw.com.
The disease that is plaguing our land is not just COVID-19, it's racism 2020.
From coast to coast, millions are flooding the streets, calling for an end to systemic racism in law enforcement. Morgan Romero has a look back at this week's demonstrations and talked to the NAACP about what protesters want moving forward.
For the third weekend, unrest continues as the fight to end police brutality against people of color rages on. In Portland, massive demonstrations honoring the life of George Floyd and other Black Americans killed by law enforcement.
Say it louder. We've got to be a consistent force, our ever ready and present voice that says we as the people are demanding change. And our youth, thank God for our millennials who are stepping up to the plate and saying, damn it, we're going to see this happen.
Thousands start at Revolution Hall and march miles across bridges and through streets on the east side in areas transformed by gentrification.
I've never been this proud to be a black man in Portland, Oregon, dog. I've never been this proud in my life.
While those rallies have been nonviolent, Saturday night a few people smashed a car's windows and slashed its tires. A theme later in the night, downtown. Hundreds gather outside the Justice Center, where they clash with law enforcement. PPB declares unlawful assemblies and uses force to get the crowd to leave.
If you do not leave, you will be subject to arrest and use of force to staff the facility.
The past several nights, people have thrown bottles, cut holes, and climbed through the fence around the Justice Center. Around midnight Sunday, near homes, some demonstrators threw mortars and fireworks at officers. Protesters want systemic reform, including defunding police.
How do we know when that message is driven home? What's that look like?
When the White House starts speaking a different language, and you're going to see that, I guarantee you, it's reaching the ears of our lawmakers that sit in Congress. They're beginning to listen.
This past week, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler announced plans to ban chokeholds and disband the gun violence reduction team and transit unit. And City Council is set to vote on the second reading of the budget this coming week, which now includes a $15 million cut to the police bureau and a redirection of those dollars into communities of color. But many activists feel those cuts don't go deep enough.
Well, guess what? Reversing systems isn't always so healthy when you bring them to, really abrupt stops and then try to build from that. Sometimes they create more of a catastrophe than they do help. It's going to be a couple of years before we see the significant change, but it's just going to be a few days before we see hopeful change.
That was Morgan Romero reporting for us. Well, it's not a moment, it's a movement, and every voice counts. Two young people in their small town of La Center, Washington, decided to organize a Black Lives Matter protest of their own. Photojournalist Nick Bieber was there.
And it is a national disgrace, and we need to advocate to change our criminal justice system.
Our town, it has very little diversity, and we think it makes it even more important to show our support for the Black Lives Matter movement.
We're here to demand justice and advocate for Black lives everywhere, for their right just to live and to thrive and to not live in fear of being murdered just for existing with black skin. We've seen a lot of pushback with people saying, well, all lives matter, all lives matter. And of course, all lives do matter. But right now it's black people who are being systematically murdered in the streets by police and neighborhood watchmen.
I wanted to not only bring this to a small town that I think needs it, but create an environment where people can social distance and be safe and still show their support for Black Lives Matter.
In terms of what needs to happen from here with the police, everybody has different opinions and everyone has a right to their opinions. But I think that we really need to be aware that our opinions as white people about what needs to happen from here does not really matter. What matters is what black people and the Black Lives Matter movement thinks needs to happen from here, because they are the ones who are most affected. We need to stop thinking that just being non-racist is okay. The world will not see the end of racism if we just agree to be non-racist. We have to actually be anti-racist. We have to actually take action. We have to advocate and actually do what it takes to create change. This is not just a moment, but a movement. And the Black Lives Matter movement, it is not going to just go away in a week. Like, this is going to persist until black people see the justice they deserve.
Other suburban communities have put on marches of their own. These are images from a large protest in Hillsborough yesterday. Protesters there have created a petition demanding the city of Hillsborough decrease the size and scope of its police force and reinvest the funds into social programs.